Patterns have a way of sticking with us. The ones we can't look away from. Shapes that pull our attention, that show up where we don't expect them. Now, imagine an entire town gripped by just one of these shapes. A single, endless spiral. At first, it's nothing unusual. A swirl in the clouds, a strange ripple in the water, a curious curl of smoke. But in the town of Kurozucho, this shape doesn't just show up here and there. It starts to weave itself into every corner of life, embedding in the wood grain of door frames, twisting in blades of grass, even winding into the very blood and bones of the people who live there. It's subtle, it's everywhere, and it's only growing stronger. This is Uzumaki, Junji Ito's masterpiece of horror, a tale that takes the familiar and warps it into something unspeakable. Here, horror doesn't come from ghouls or ancient myths. Instead, it's a quiet, invasive force that grows with every page, taking shape in a story of madness, obsession, and transformation. In Uzumaki, terror isn't hiding in the shadows. It's winding its way into everything around you, in ways you can't control, can't resist, and, ultimately, can't survive. Today, we're opening the first pages of this nightmare, and together, we'll be descending into the heart of Kurozucho, a place where the fear is palpable, and the spiral refuses to let go. So if you're ready, let's begin. Just don't expect any easy exits, because once this spiral gets inside of you, there's no way out. Welcome back, horror fans, cinephiles, and giallo enthusiasts. This is Tanner Leeser for The King in Giallo, and today I'm venturing out of the usual giallo cinema territory to dive into one of the most twisted, mind-bending horror stories of the last century. Junji Ito's horror manga, Uzumaki, or Spiral, released in August 1998 through September 1999. I've wanted to talk about this piece of horror media for a long time because, quite frankly, to me, it is one of the most original horror tales ever. And in my view, it ranks as one of the best Lovecraftian and cosmic horror stories out there without a single tie or overt nod to H.P. Lovecraft himself. It's a horror that grips you, distorts your perception, and spirals into a depth of dread like nothing else. For today's video, I will do a cursory overview and rundown of the original manga, but won't be going too deep. But I do plan on getting to that in some later video in the future. This video will be covering each of the 20 chapters, the original 19 and the lost chapter, giving you a sense of the madness contained within, without spoiling every terrifying twist and turn. I'll be breaking down how each chapter relates to the wider story as Kirie and Shuichi, our two protagonists, try to navigate a cursed town obsessed with spirals and what happens as reality itself begins to twist around this bizarre shape. I will give my thoughts on the manga, having recently just reread it, and give some brief thoughts on the 2000 film, as well as the recent 2024 4-part anime series. So, without further ado, here is Uzumaki. Beginning with its creator, Junji Ito is a celebrated Japanese horror manga artist and writer, known for his unsettling, surreal tales that delve into cosmic horror, psychological terror, and body horror. Born in 1963, Ito first gained recognition with his series Tomie, a haunting story about a girl who seduces and drives others to madness and violence. His work has since become synonymous with horror manga, with titles like Uzumaki and Gyo cementing his status as a master of the genre. Ito's stories often explore themes of obsession, transformation, and the unknown, utilizing grotesque visuals and nightmarish scenarios to disturb readers on a visceral level. His distinct style combines detailed line work with vivid, almost impossible scenes, creating an atmosphere that's simultaneously horrifying and captivating. Among his accolades, Ito has won the Eisner Award for Best Writer-Artist multiple times and has been recognized internationally, with adaptations of his work appearing in film and anime. His influence extends beyond manga, inspiring horror creators worldwide with his unique blend of existential dread and haunting imagery. Okay, I will now go through the events of the manga. I will attempt to be thorough covering each chapter, but also refrain from revealing everything explicitly. That will be for a later deep dive video. So, Chapter 1. The story of Uzumaki begins innocuously, introducing the eerie town of Kurozucho, a name which ominously means Black Vortex Town, which becomes the stage for increasingly nightmarish events. This chapter, entitled The Spiral Obsession, Part 1, follows Kirie Goshima, a high school girl living in Kurozucho, as she witnesses her boyfriend, Shuichi Saito's father, descend into an all-consuming obsession with spirals, a seemingly harmless fascination that soon reveals itself as an inescapable curse. Ultimately, Mr. Saito becomes the first fatal victim and is found dead, having apparently succeeded in transforming his body into a physical spiral. Chapter 2. Following the horrifying events of Mr. Saito's death in Chapter 1, The Spiral Obsession Part 2 focuses on Shuichi's mother, Mrs. Saito, who becomes the next victim of the spiral curse in Kurosucho. This chapter explores her descent into paranoia and terror as she is haunted by spirals to the point of self-mutilation, as she attempts to violently remove all the spirals from her body, including her hair, her fingerprints, and her cochleas inside her ears. Her inner ear trauma results in the unfortunate woman being plagued by persistent feelings of vertigo as if she is spiraling downward. Chapter 3. In The Scar, Junji Ito introduces a new character, Azami Kurotani, a girl with a crescent-shaped scar on her forehead and a knack for attracting any guy she wants. Her scar, she believes, behaves as an unusual sinister charm. This chapter follows Azami's interactions with Kirie, Shuichi, and an enamored boy named Okada as the spiral curse takes on a terrifying yet strangely seductive form, exploring themes of beauty, obsession, fatal attraction, and the grotesque nature of the spiral curse, culminating in a horrific climax. Chapter 4. In The Firing Effect, the spiral obsession has transferred from Shuichi's father to Kirie's father, a local pottery maker who has been transfixed with the items he has been creating recently in his kiln. The pieces were all formed normally initially, but through the firing process came out warped into beautiful spiral manifestations with eerily familiar visages embedded in the surfaces. Mr. Goshima reveals that he has been using a new clay he has dredged up from the local pond at the heart of the town. Dragonfly Pond is a site where the smoke of the recently cremated deceased has been seen spiraling around before descending downward and making landfall in a whirlpool. Chapter 5. In Twisted Souls, the story delves into the horrors of twisted fates and inescapable connections, bringing the spiral curse to bear on human relationships. This chapter focuses on the doomed love story of Katsunori and Yoriko, two high school students whose feuding families are neighbors in the same row house, as the star-crossed lovers fall victim to the increasingly bizarre and horrifying manifestations of the spiral in Kurosucho. Chapter 6. In Medusa, the spiral curse manifests in a new and eerie form, haunting the high school students of Kurosucho through a horrific phenomenon involving their hair, which has taken on a mind of its own. This chapter follows Kirie, who has unwittingly become the recipient of massive amounts of attention from everybody, and her envious friend Sakino, as they cope with dealing with this strange phenomenon, and Sakino's desire to command all the attention, which ultimately leads to deadly consequences. Chapter 7. In Jack in the Box, Junji Ito presents a tale of unrequited love, obsession, and the horrifying power of the spiral curse, which continues to manifest in bizarre and nightmarish ways. The story introduces Mitsuro Yamaguchi, a high school student in Kurosucho who becomes dangerously fixated on main character Kirie Goshima, and ultimately falls victim to both his obsession with Kirie, coupled with the town's relentless curse as it warps not only his mind, but his body too. Chapter 8. In The Snail, Junji Ito explores the spiral curse's influence through a grotesque transformation as students at Kurozucho High School begin to undergo a horrific metamorphosis that defies explanation. This chapter focuses on the disturbing events surrounding the shy and unpopular student Katayama as he becomes the latest victim of the curse in a way that leaves his classmates horrified. Chapter 9. In The Black Lighthouse, Junji Ito delves into the mysterious and foreboding presence of Kurozucho's lighthouse, which becomes a nightmarish setting for the latest manifestation of the spiral curse. This chapter combines claustrophobic horror with supernatural dread as Kirie and her brother Mitsuo become trapped within the cursed lighthouse, encountering disturbingly charred bodies and the eerie, hypnotic pull of the spirals. Chapter 10. In Mosquitoes, the spiral curse spreads to Kurozucho's hospital, taking on an insidious new form where Kirie is recovering. The chapter combines horror with a whodunit mystery and cult-like behavior, revealing a disturbing shift in the townspeople's behavior, especially among expectant mothers, who develop a horrifying addiction to blood. Chapter 11. In The Umbilical Cord, the spiral curse in Kurozucho escalates as the horrors witnessed in the hospital's maternity ward by Kirie reach an unspeakable climax. This chapter blends themes of birth and decay with body horror, depicting a gruesome transformation that spreads across the maternity ward as the spiral curse overtakes both the patients and the hospital staff. Chapter 12. In The Storm, the spiral curse infects the very forces of nature, bringing forth a terrifying new manifestation in the form of supernatural storms. This chapter combines natural horror with supernatural dread as typhoons become conscious entities, driven by an obsession with Kurozucho, and particularly Kirie. Chapter 13. In The House, the spiral curse pervades, forcing Kirie and her family into a claustrophobic and nightmarish space in one of the many row houses scattered throughout the town. Another typhoon forces them to remain inside, despite becoming plagued by a new insidious sickness which affects their bodies. This chapter escalates the body horror as the spirals infect the human body through conical, spiky growths forming on the skin. Chapter 14. In Butterflies, an out-of-town news reporter named Chie arrives in Kurozucho to ascertain what has happened in the aftermath of numerous typhoons striking the small town, leading to the town losing contact with the outside world. What she discovers is a town in ruin, a population of survivors at each other's throats, and an environment in which all must tread lightly and quietly or risk churning up spontaneously violent whirlwinds. Chapter 15. In Chaos, the spiral curse pushes Kurozucho to an unprecedented state of societal breakdown, with its influence extending not only to nature and individuals, but now engulfing the entire town. The curse's grip becomes so overwhelming that law and order collapse, giving rise to gangs, violence, an apocalyptic atmosphere, and the most heinous and deplorable acts being committed as society spirals into depravity. The chapter explores the effects of the curse on the community as a whole, showcasing the spiral's ability to manipulate human behavior and amplify disorder. Chapter 16. In Erosion, the cursed town of Kurozucho descends further into inescapable horror as its residents try desperately to flee, only to be thwarted by the curse's relentless power. This chapter introduces a new level of despair as humanity crumbles into two categories of either being desperate survivors doing the unthinkable in order to survive, or becoming inhabitants in the cramped row houses and transforming in grotesque and unnatural ways. Chapter 17. In Escape, the desperation to leave Kurozucho reaches its peak as Kirie, Shuichi, and a few remaining survivors make a final attempt to flee the cursed town. The chapter intensifies the themes of inevitability and entrapment, illustrating just how pervasive and inescapable the spiral curse has become, and how beyond saving all of the survivors are. Chapter 18. In Labyrinth, the horror of the spiral curse reaches an overwhelming climax as Kurozucho itself has been completely reshaped into a twisted, spiraling labyrinth made up of the row houses with the pond at the center of the spiral. Shuichi and Kirie return from their failed escape attempt, the only survivors not to become twisted by the spiral's curse, only to find that years have passed and their hometown has been transformed into an inescapable nightmare of warped buildings, spiraling pathways, and eerie, entangled structures. This chapter reveals the total consumption of Kurozucho by the spiral curse, pushing Kirie and Shuichi deeper into the horrifying heart of the town's transformation as they search for her parents in vain. What they find is even more ominous. The crowded row houses, which moments ago were packed, are suddenly empty, and at the center of the spiral is a stairway seemingly leading to hell. Chapter 19. In the final chapter, Completion, the curse of the spiral reaches its full, nightmarish culmination. Kirie and Shuichi's descent into the hidden spiral stairway at the heart of the town takes them to the source of Kurozucho's curse, revealing the grim reality behind the spiral's influence and the horrifyingly cyclical fate awaiting the town and its residents. In Uzumaki's lost chapter, Galaxies, Junji Ito takes the themes of cosmic horror and the inescapable pull of the spiral to new extremes. Shuichi observes a potentially undiscovered spiral-shaped galaxy which intrigues all the town's residents. This chapter, though separate from the main narrative, further explores the spiral's influence as a force on a universal scale, affecting only the people of Kurozucho, though extending out the reach of the spiral's influence into the cosmos. Uzumaki has also spawned 2 video games which I am unable to comment on, a 2000 film which was made before the manga had concluded and thus contains a different ending, and a 2024 anime series. In brief, the anime series is an amazing adaptation of the original source material. The chapters of the manga speed along and they feel very episodic, with some of them bleeding into the next chapter, such as 1 to 2 to 4, 9 to 10 to 11, and 12 on through to the end, while others behave as isolated incidents which could theoretically be moved around in the narrative, such as chapters 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, and the Lost chapter. I do think the Lost chapter being removed from the narrative of the omnibus is a smart move. Personally, it feels like an early drafted story before the rest was better conceptualized, especially when you consider that the source of what is happening is actually buried in the town and not from outer space. I'll give my opinions of each chapter in a later video, but I will say here that I love Uzumaki as a whole, and some of the chapters are so damned inventive and horrifying. I was floored by how much I enjoyed it when I first read it, and I literally could not put it down and read the entire 600 plus pages without stopping. I'll also cover the anime and the film in greater detail in the future, but what I will say about the anime now, besides having amazing animation in the first episode, does a superb job of telling the stories, and rather than going in order of the chapters, it spins numerous plates at once, which enhances the storytelling so much. Like I said, the manga's chapters go quickly, like 5-7 minutes, and are very much set up, then payoff. But the series will set up numerous chapters at once, pay off 1 or 2 in an episode, and set up a couple more before the episode finally ends. For example, in the first episode, the show introduces Chapter 1, then Chapter 3, then concludes Chapter 1 and introduces Chapter 2, then introduces Chapter 8 and concludes Chapter 2, then finally concludes Chapter 3. This allows for numerous of the plots to occur at once and shifts the narrative from feeling more tangential and episodic into feeling more cohesive, like the spiral is infecting numerous aspects of the town at once, and we are observing things get worse at different moments. In conclusion, Uzumaki stands as a defining work in the horror genre, exemplifying Junji Ito's unique ability to blend the surreal with the profoundly unsettling. Its legacy lies in its exploration of obsession and transformation, using the simple yet powerful motif of the spiral to symbolize the inescapable grip of fear and madness. Unlike conventional horror that relies on external monsters, Uzumaki taps into the psyche, illustrating how ordinary life can devolve into chaos and horror when touched by the inexplicable. Ito's masterful storytelling and haunting visuals have influenced countless creators, solidifying his place as a titan of horror manga. The chilling atmosphere, combined with its intricate narrative structure, invites readers to confront their own fears and anxieties, making Uzumaki not just a story, but an experience that lingers long after the final page is turned. As adaptations in various media continue to emerge, the themes and imagery of Uzumaki resonate with new generations, ensuring its status as a classic. Its legacy endures as a reminder that true horror often lies in the familiar turned grotesque, challenging us to look closer at the world around us and the spirals that may be lurking just beneath the surface.
$5,000 says this is a mask.